Mississippi police have arrested a man accused of killing his mother and stuffing her body in a trash can. According to the Tupelo Police Department, officers were called to the family home for a welfare check. When they arrived, the man reportedly admitted to the killing and showed officers where he had placed his mother's body. The victim has been identified as Sherri Lazore, a retired public school teacher. Investigators say she had stab wounds to her head and neck and had been beaten with a shovel. I'm your host, Kennedi Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. Sherri Lazore was a longtime public school teacher in Mississippi, spending nearly 30 years working for the Tupelo Public School District. Friends and colleagues describe her as a great teacher who was loved and adored. On April 29th, officers with the Tupelo Police Department were called to the Lazore home to conduct a welfare check. According to a courtroom report from the Tupelo Daily News, when police arrived, Sherri's son Joshua answered the door. Investigators say when officers asked where his mother was, Joshua directed them to the backyard. There, officers reportedly discovered 62-year-old Sherri Lazore's body inside a garbage can. Police say she had multiple stab wounds to her head and neck. Joshua Lazore was arrested, and police say he allegedly admitted to killing his mother. The incident was reportedly caught on camera. Detectives say video was recovered from the residence's security system. During his bond hearing, Joshua Lazore appeared to willingly take responsibility for the crime. Court records report he told the judge, quote, "I'd like to waive my right to an attorney and get to the police section." This is not Lazore's first encounter with law enforcement. In April 2020, he was arrested for destroying the lobby of the Lee County Sheriff's Office. According to the agency, Lazore entered the lobby attempting to turn himself in. Deputies told him he had no active warrants and asked him to leave. Hours later, authorities say he returned, and this time he threw a chair at two televisions and threw a computer on the floor. He was charged with felony destruction of property and was sentenced to probation. Now, years later, Lazore faces far more serious charges, accused of killing his own mom. He faces the possibility of spending life behind bars. And joining me to talk more about this is law enforcement instructor and jury consultant Sunny Slaughter. Sunny, thank you so much for coming on today. Let's just get right to it. So based on your expertise, how common are cases where familiar relationships end in such extreme violence, and what warning signs are often overlooked?
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you again. And this is such a horrific story. We are seeing more and more of these familial relationships that end in murder, and specifically those that from a child committing murder against a parent. How horrific is this? The warning signs often tend to be that the child has exhibited some form of anger, or the person has exhibited some form of anger, not just slight anger, but really aggressive behavior. They've made very strong threats of homicide or very violent behavior that they will do to the individual. And, you know, a lot of times, because it is someone that they know, because it is a child, regardless of age, the parents and others tend to say, oh, well, you know, this kind of happens, and they ignore it. But we cannot ignore this because people, they are not unstable. There's so many individuals that are not well, in the sense that they cannot determine the fact that this is very violent, and what they are doing is, I'm not saying they have a mental health diagnosis or disease, but they are acting in a manner in which they are dangerous because they may have some mental instability going on.
And are there any type of just red flags that people should look out for when a child, even an adult child, starts becoming violent towards a parent?
Yes, if they become physically aggressive, if they start isolating the parent, if they have ever hit them even one time is enough, if they are grab on them, if they start hiding things, or lurking, a lot of times what has happened, and they don't tell anyone. If a parent say, or regardless of the age of the child, they wake up and the child is standing over them, if they're kind of lurking around or sneaking around, something that you would think is a red flag for someone else that is not related to you, you should also think could be a red flag for someone that is related to you. The stalking, the lurking, the intimidation, the threats, verbal, physical, all of those things are an indication of potential harm and escalation.
How does domestic violence manifest differently, though, in parent child relationships compared to intimate partner relationships?
It manifests in a way that we tend to ignore far too often. And I'm glad that you actually said the word domestic violence, because people don't seem to equate the two. And you just tied it in perfectly. It's not intimate partner violence, but it is domestic violence, and that there is a relationship there that can and often does become violent, and we tend to ignore it because we have feelings that are uniquely different for this individual than it would be for somebody that we were just that is not directly related to us, someone that is not. And for women to have this, not from the womb. We don't think our children, whether we give birth to them, birth situation or circumstance, will become violent and dangerous to us. But I recently had to tell someone, if you don't think that your child will kill you, you are absolutely wrong, because they can and they will.
In cases like Joshua's, how do mental health issues and violence intersect?
They intersect in a way that the person has no moral grounding for who the target is. They drugs, alcohol, isolation, attached to video games, things that we think are normal behavior. Not necessarily normal, because the person might not have, a mental health disease and diagnosis, but they absolutely may have mental health instabilities where they're not capable of sound judgment and reason. They are acting erratic, they are violent, they are and then sometimes silent. They have these predatory type of behaviors where they're kind of thinking, and then the thinking becomes the manifestation in their actions.
And we'll never know truly just the inner workings of their mother-son relationship. But how might Sherri have minimized or overlooked Joshua's potential warning signs? And why do parents sometimes do that? Is it just like how we talked about earlier, just in denial, not wanting to think that a child that they birth is capable of doing something like that?
First of all, I know, we know, looking outside in, something was amiss that she ignored. She didn't think that her son would do this to her. She ignored his behaviors, things that he said, and she just really didn't have that firm belief that someone that she gave birth to, someone that she loved, she thought she could fix it. You know how we do in regular relationships. Oh, we can fix them, we can change them. And she also didn't tell enough people, or maybe she did, but not in a way that they thought that the level of threat and danger was real and severe. She overlooked things because she loved him. What she didn't realize is that while he may have loved her, he also hated her. And when we have children that hate and despise silently, and sometimes not so silently, parents tend to ignore that. I'm a mother of four, but you have to really know your children, but you also have to know yourself. There is no way that she did not feel it in her spirit, even if she didn't feel it physically. I mean, it caught her off guard, but by that time it was too late. It was just way too late for her. And we should not ignore the same flags, the red flags that you talked about earlier. We should not ignore those from those that we love the most, because loving someone the most can actually hinder our own safety and security, because we ignore that intuition that we all have.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, Joshua had prior run ins with law enforcement. When he was first arrested or reported, what could law enforcement or the courts have done differently?
They could have put a Baker's Act in place. They could have sent him away to get a mental health assessment. Now, I haven't looked at his file, so I don't know if they ever did a Baker on him, if they ever forced him into, because they thought that he was a threat. The courts, he had a lot of intervention with the courts, and they should have actually sent him. We need more mental health evaluations now than ever before because people seem to be dealing with a lot of things that they've never dealt with or in ways that have been ignored even by the courts. So having that restraining order, and I always let people know this, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. If you have a restraining order, even if it's against your child, the person who got the restraining order also cannot violate the restraining order, which means you can't say, oh, well, something happened. You have to abide by the court order, or you have to go to court and get the court order removed. And then you have to tell them why you want it removed, because then it eliminates the fact that the court ignored what you said and just said, oh, okay, this is okay. See, we can't have it one way or another. We've got to follow the rules. People have to know what their rights are, but they have to take their own safety into account as well. I think the law enforcement, whoever made the call for the wellness check, must have suspected something because she didn't respond, or it was unlike behavior. So they went out, and police, they have to keep arresting people if that is what the law requires and if the incident requires it. And the judges have to make sure people are getting the mental health evaluations, but then people also have to report. The victims have to report. The victims have to do their part to save their lives as well.
And you bring up a good point there about just mental health. In your opinion, how can mental health professionals and law enforcement just work together to identify and potentially even lessen risks?
So, that's a great question. And I'm glad that you answered it, asked that question, and we can have this dialogue now, because a lot of these days, law enforcement and social workers who specialize in mental health evaluations and support and assistance are working together in departments across the country. I'm not sure whether this is in Tupelo, Mississippi or not, but I know that they do have there are some in the state where social workers are going out on mental health calls or potential mental health calls with law enforcement, even if they're not going out on the calls, and they bring somebody back to the police station. If they arrest them, if they detain them, they can have a brief evaluation that can then be court ordered for a further evaluation. The connection and the connectivity and relationship between social work and mental health practice and law enforcement professionals needs to be more. And now more than ever, we need to ensure that courts are doing their part to get the services that people need, make it mandatory and requirement. But we also got to have people and the funding to ensure that these things are in place too, to save more lives.
Are there, interventions that work best with violent adult children?
Yes. So some short-term stays to evaluate just how potentially violent an individual can be. Medication is another opportunity. Like I said, going through, if they get Bakered, and it's a requirement, I think it's the 72 hours that they have to do that. For adult children, you know, sometimes you just have to let your children not live with you if they are dangerous to you. And you have to, get other family members, get other support systems in place. Adult children can be difficult because they can also mask their behaviors in very unique ways, that the other person is victimizing them or they don't care. They make the parent feel guilty. Guilt tends to be something that parents often feel a great deal of, that they didn't do everything that they could or should have done for the child at some point in time. And kids, regardless of their age, they play up on that.
How should friends and family approach someone like Sherri, who might be downplaying the danger that they're in?
They should take her away to the side and really strongly urge her to see what is happening. If there if they have someone that's in the family that is a mental health professional or a counselor or in law enforcement, get them to talk to her so they can point out red flags. People don't want to have these conversations, but these are conversations that we absolutely need to be having in our lives and in our communities and in families. If they are religious or have any type of faith, get a faith leader to point it out. Whoever the person is most likely to listen and hear, because there's a difference. Some people listening to you, but they don't hear you. Some people hear you, but they don't listen to you. So those that can do the best listening and hearing conversation is what we need to have for intervention. Just like in alcohol and drugs, we need to be stronger in the push to save other people's lives when they can't save their own.
And we know that this can affect people in more ways than one. If you could explain just what kind of psychological toll does long-term abuse by a child take on a parent?
Oh gosh, not only the physical, but the psychological, like you said, the guilt that a parent can feel because they don't feel like they've done enough. It can affect them in ways of the trauma that they are never the same. They don't sleep well, they don't eat, they have such, it can change their physical composition because guilt is a heavy, heavy burden to bear. And the mind becomes so warped with distorted images of who they are because they feel less than, because their child makes them feel less than. And that behavior becomes so much a part of who they are that they are not living and thriving. People can become depressed, they can become suicidal, they can ignore things that they would usually pay close attention to. It can have an impact on other children and other family members. It can destroy relationships, but more importantly, it can destroy their heart. And I was saying a broken heart can sometimes kill people in ways that we cannot recover from.
Absolutely. And we know that Joshua was arrested. He was charged in his mother's death. We're waiting just to see what happens next. How does the legal system balance rehabilitation and punishment in cases like Joshua's?
Oh, well, first of all, the balance is going to be difficult because of the heinousness of the crime. However, the rehabilitation, if he does have mental health disease confirmed, then that needs to require treatment, which will be long term in a facility that is a confinement facility of jail, but where he is ordered to get mandatory treatment. So he's going to have to get the treatment if he does have if he has mental health disease and diagnosis. And then the long term incarceration ensures that he does get the treatment in there, but also that he is not a danger to anyone else, including himself. And uh, he's looking at a very long sentence for what he has done to his mother if convicted. So the rehabilitation can happen along with the treatment, and then the time away to give him the opportunity to think about his actions and what he did.
And the Sherri has some family that she's leaving behind. Read that in her obituary. Everyone just describes her as a great person. How do surviving family members cope with the grief and guilt after something like this happens?
It's very difficult, the loss of a loved one, and particularly someone who is so radiant. And I read some of her obituary, and she was also a teacher. So she had other people in the family, outside the family. She apparently was a beloved individual. And the family is going to have a great deal of grief, but they're also going to have a great deal of guilt too, because some of them saw and did nothing or said nothing or did not do enough, and they will have that. And then some of them had no idea, and they may blame other family members who said, well, I saw this. So it's going to be a tug of war. And also, he is still a part of that family. So how do they grieve and how do they get over? Attending the trial will be very difficult for them because they will get the details of the heinousness of the crime, and they will have to confront that. And even though there is a trial, it is never It's an ongoing process of guilt, grief, and getting over what the loss of someone that was so beloved and someone that should still be here, while thinking about the level of incarceration for the individual who is still a family member, who is still her son did to her. So it's a very tough rope of balancing strategically, but I don't know if people ever get over it. They kind of just get through it.
And for anyone watching that, they may be a part of a family struggling with internal violence, what message would you like to convey to them?
I would like to say that if you are a victim of violence in your home, in your life, that you seek out the resources to get the help that you need. Contact local law enforcement, advocacy groups, the National Center for Domestic Violence. The state has an agency in all 50 states. You can call that number in your particular state. You can look up the local advocacy organizations, try to get help, seek resources and services. If you are the victim of a crime, the local district attorney's office has the crime victims support services. They are in place. You have local organizations. The state agency has the victims Crime Compensation Commission. Every state has one of those. They have resources. They have a list of resources, a list of services and support that have mental health, food, other support services. If there's a homicide, they even have organizations that do that kind of cleanup. There is a lot that people don't know about, but if you reach out to local law enforcement, they should be able to navigate you through the systems and services, at least in some form or fashion.
All right, well, this is a story that we will be following closely. Sunny, thank you so much for your advice and your insight. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Lazore was denied bond. The judge reportedly said that Lazore was a danger to the community. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.